Fellas, we've got a pretty solid lineup of UFC champions right now, so I thought we'd go through what if every UFC champion moved up and faced the top 5 in the weight class above them. So the champion, the entire top 5, see how they do with it to move up a weight class. And we'll start off with the dominant flyweight champion Pantoja versus the top 5 at bantamweight. And we'll start off with Merab himself. Now, this is a fight that I can actually get behind as far as champion versus champion goes, because I think Pantoja, he's cleared out flyweight, Merab's cleared out bantamweight. They're two of the most dominant champions in the UFC right now. It's a fight that I can get behind, but in terms of who I think is going to win, I've got to go with Merab to win at 135. As good as Pantoja is, I think the physicality Merab, I mean, it's already too much for a lot of the bantamweights who have equal wrestling to him, like Umar Nurmagomedov. I think Pantoja moving up a weight class facing a bigger Merab who's dominating at bantamweight right now. As good as Pantoja was on the ground, then he probably would be the most dangerous dude on the ground for Merab. I don't see Merab getting subbed. I don't see Pantoja doing much to Merab on the ground. I see it's been an average Merab performance. Constant takedowns, taking down Pantoja, being the more physical guy in this fight. And just a classic Merab performance, to be fair. So I think this is a fight that I would, I'd get behind. Like I said, Pantoja's got a good pace, just like Merab has. He's got that heart, he's got that dog in him that Merab has, and also he's really talented on the ground. But I don't know if that would translate to Merab as well. And you look at some of the grapplers. I mean, when was the last time we really saw Pantoja against like a high-level grappler? Like Kai Kara-France striker, Kaya Sakura striker, Moreno striker, a lot of the Brandon Royval striker, a lot of the guys that Pantoja's facing are like heavy strikers. And now you're moving up a weight class to face the best wrestler, one of the best wrestlers in the UFC who can match that physicality. I think Merab beats Pantoja. And then for Umar Nurmagomedov, the number one guy, I see you going very similar to how I just explained Merab. I'm going to go Umar via WrestleFuck. Now, I can see Pantoja dragging Umar into deep waters, especially if it's like a 5-round fight, because we've seen that Umar doesn't have the best gas tank, but I think the pure wrestling of Umar would be a little bit too much for Pantoja. So I'd probably go Umar via WrestleFuck against Pantoja. In terms of Sean O'Malley, now we've actually seen this fight before in like a sparring session years ago where O'Malley actually finished Pantoja, but I think nowadays I'm going to go O'Malley to beat Pantoja, just because I think O'Malley's a sniper, man, and Pantoja's got one of those styles where he's not really got the best defense. He kind of has that scrappy style, hit and get hit on the feet. You can't really afford to do that against the sniper in O'Malley. And O'Malley's takedown defense is pretty solid. Like, he got taken down by Merab, the best wrestler in the UFC. I think O'Malley will be able to survive against Pantoja, probably clips him and knocks him out at some point in the fight, or at least heavily wobbles him. Petr Yan, nightmare matchup for Pantoja. I think Yan pieces him up. Yan's an amazing wrestler. He keeps the fight standing, and I think he just simply breaks down Pantoja on the feet. So I think Petr Yan, another nightmare matchup. And Corey Sandhagen, I mean, similar to what I said about O'Malley, I think Sandhagen's just too well-rounded. He's got that good jiu-jitsu base, so I don't think he gets subbed by Pantoja. His takedown defense isn't that bad, and I think he'd just pick apart Pantoja on the feet. And again, could potentially finish him as well. So, as good as Pantoja is, I think the result would be him losing to everybody in the top 5 at bantamweight. I think he's super dominant at flyweight, but I think stylistically moving up a weight class, I don't think he matches well against a lot of the top 5 at bantamweight. I think bantamweight's full of killers, and even though Pantoja I still think will be the dominant guy at flyweight, I think moving up a weight class, I don't really like his odds too much. But then for Merab, moving up a weight class to face the top 5 in the featherweight division, starting off with Alexander Volkanovski. Again, a fight that I can kind of get behind. Like I said, Merab's dominating the bantamweight division. I think he's one of the few champions that deserve to move up a weight class. But I'm going to go with Volkanovski to beat Merab. I've seen quite like a 50-50 view from the general fan base on this fight, but I just think Volkanovski's takedown defense is elite. We saw it in the fight with Makhachev, who's a big lightweight, and he was able to defend a lot of the takedowns from Makhachev a few years ago. On the feet, Volkanovski's on a completely different level to most guys he faces. He pieces up strikers at 145. I can only imagine he'd do the same to Merab, who's smaller than him. So I think Volkanovski would just straight piece Merab up. And I know Merab's an insane wrestler, got that good pace. I don't know if that would work against Volkanovski. A bigger Volkanovski who's got a good 5-round pace, who's one of the best strikers in the UFC, who's durable, who's got really good anti-wrestling as well. I'm going to go with O'Malley. I'm going to go with Volkanovski to beat Merab. Keeps the fight standing. I just see a bit of an easier version of the Islam Makhachev fight. Less threat on the feet, less physical, less of a physical guy in terms of strength, less submission threat as well. So as good as Merab is, I think he'd lose to Volkanovski. Merab versus Movsar Evloev, two of some of the best wrestlers in the UFC right now. I've got to go Evloev to win this one. He's basically like a Merab with less stamina, less dominance, but a lot more physical. He's so strong for 145, is Evloev. We saw him out grapple in a very close fight, Aljamain Sterling. He's undefeated. He's on this big winning streak. I think Evloev's one of the few fighters that I just don't really see Merab getting that chain wrestling against. I think Evloev would out-wrestle Merab, like I said, just more of a physical guy. Diego Lopez. Now, I can see an argument to say that Merab out-wrestles Diego Lopez, but I think Lopez roughs him up. I just think Lopez is too dangerous everywhere. On the feet, extremely powerful. Dropped Volkanovski, finished Gene Silva. Obviously, a force to be reckoned with. On the ground, he's got good jiu-jitsu as well. We saw Diego Lopez against Movsar Evloev a few years back, and he looked really good on the ground, and he's obviously got that great BJJ base, so I just think Lopez, even though it would be a banger of a fight, I think Lopez would rough up Merab. Yair Rodriguez, I think Merab would maul Yair Rodriguez. Yair is known for his kind of bad grappling. He submitted Josh Emmett a few years ago, but apart from that, his wrestling isn't the best. You put him against one of the most physical wrestlers in the UFC, Merab, I think he'd wear out Yair Rodriguez across 3 rounds. I'm not picking a guy that got submitted by Brian Ortega recently to beat Merab. I think Merab mauls him. And Lerone Murphy, I think Murphy would be a tough test for him because Murphy's so well-rounded, but I've got to go with Merab out wrestling him to a decision. We saw Murphy struggle a little bit in the Josh Emmett fight with the wrestling. I just think I'd probably trust Merab to get the takedowns going and out-wrestle Lerone Murphy in this fight. And even a couple of years ago against Gabriel Santos, Lerone Murphy got out-grappled. So I'm going to go with Merab to beat Lerone Murphy. So the result of Merab, I think he'd beat Yair Rodriguez and Lerone Murphy. I think Volkanovski, Diego Lopez would be a little bit too much for him. But I think Yair Rodriguez, Lerone Murphy, I could see Merab beating those guys just because I don't think they've proven their wrestling enough on the same level as Merab. So I think Merab probably beats Yair, probably beats Murphy, but I wouldn't trust him to become a champion. And then Volkanovski moving up to 155. Now, we've seen him move up before, went unsuccessful. Now, Volkanovski versus Topuria, I mean, it goes without saying, Topuria wins. We saw it last year at UFC 298. Topuria knocked him out. I think, if anything, Topuria would have a bigger advantage at 145 because he looks a lot more physically bigger at 155 as well. So, obviously, I'm going to go with Topuria to knock out Volkanovski. We've seen it before and again. Islam Makhachev, same thing. We've seen Makhachev versus Volkanovski twice at 155. First fight was close, but Makhachev would win again. He's in his prime right now, even though he's moved up to 170. He's in his prime right now. Volkanovski, he's not washed or anything, but he's obviously on the end of his career. Last time we saw them face each other, Makhachev knocked him out. I think he'd probably do the same thing, get a finish over Volkanovski. Then for Arman Tsarukyan versus Volkanovski, I feel like this would get mixed kind of reviews from most MMA fans. I think Volkanovski outdogs him, and I'm saying this based off the first fight with Islam Makhachev. I see Tsarukyan being a very similar type of fight to Makhachev, except there's less submission threat on the ground. He's less durable because we've seen Tsarukyan kind of gas out or do like, I guess, worse in like that 3rd, 4th, and 5th round, and just less good on the feet. I mean, he's athletic on the feet, is Arman Tsarukyan. He's very athletic, one of the most athletic in the division. But I think Volkanovski outdogs him. We saw Oliveira versus Tsarukyan, where there was an argument to say that Oliveira won that fight because of the ground and pound and because of how he did on the feet. And I think Volkanovski would beat Tsarukyan for that reason. Just picks apart Tsarukyan on the feet, defends takedowns, probably gets taken down once or twice, but I don't think Tsarukyan would do much with a takedown. So I think Volk beats Arman. Oliveira versus Volkanovski, one of the best fights that we're probably never going to see. Imagine prime for prime. This would have been a fucking banger at 155, but I'm going to go with Volkanovski to win this one. I think he'd force a stand-up fight against Oliveira. Oliveira's wrestling isn't on the same level as Makhachev, and Volkanovski showed great kind of takedown offense against Makhachev, so I think the fight would be on the feet, and as reckless as Oliveira is, I think Volkanovski would pick him apart. I think Volkanovski, very calculated guy, picks apart Oliveira. And then Volkanovski versus Holloway for a 4th fight. Now, this is going to be a bit of a hot take. I think Holloway beats Volkanovski in a 4th fight. At 155 nowadays, Volkanovski versus Holloway 4. Even though Holloway's 0-3 against him and the 3rd one was the most dominant, I think Holloway wins a close decision. Holloway at 155 seems to be a completely different fighter to at 145. He beat Dustin Poirier dominantly. He picked apart Justin Gaethje, and fair enough, Volkanovski's on a different level, but you look at the career spot Volkanovski's in right now and you compare it to Max Holloway. I think Holloway could beat Volkanovski at 155 nowadays, even though I guess that's, there's not really too much to back it up considering that he's 0-3 against him. I overall think the result would be him beating Arman and Oliveira. I think Volkanovski right now, he could be competitive against everybody in the top 5, apart from maybe, like I said, Makhachev and I guess Topuria. But I think he'd beat Arman. I think he'd beat Oliveira, and obviously him and Holloway. I mean, he's 3-0 against Holloway, but I'd probably lean towards Holloway winning nowadays. But I think he'd beat Arman. I think he'd beat Oliveira. So I think he'd beat a couple of the guys at the top 5. And then for Ilia Topuria moving up to welterweight, something that he's expressed interest in before. Ilia Topuria versus JDM. I think JDM murks Ilia Topuria, if I'm being honest. I think the size differences are going to be way too much. Topuria's quite small for 155, and JDM's a big dude, man. I just see, like, you look at their waist as well, like their height as well. I think JDM's like 5'11", and Topuria's like 5'7". I think JDM would pick apart Ilia Topuria. Obviously, Topuria's got slick boxing, but he's small even for featherweight. You put him against a big 170 boxer in JDM, who also has great anti-grappling, good 5-round pace, durable as well. I think JDM would pick apart Topuria. And even if Topuria came with like a grappling heavy game plan, that ain't going to work against JDM. He's just too big, too powerful for Ilia Topuria. So I think JDM would pick apart Ilia. One of the only guys that can actually pick him apart in the UFC, considering Ilia's boxing. And then Ilia versus Bilal Muhammad. I'm going to go with Ilia to win this one. I think this would go very similar to the JDM fight in the sense that, if anything, I think there'd be less success with Belal on the ground. Ilia comes from this big BJJ background. We've never really seen him get out-grappled in the UFC apart from a takedown from Bryce Mitchell. I can see Topuria picking apart Belal Muhammad on the feet with that slick boxing, potentially even knocking him out. And I don't see there being too much of a wrestling threat from Belal. I know he's a lot more physical and bigger than Ilia, which I guess is where he'd succeed, but we've seen Ilia with good grappling, comes from this big BJJ background. I think it'll be the JDM fight part 2. And then for Sean Brady versus Ilia, again, this might be a hot take. I think Ilia knocks him out. I'm sorry, if you're getting finished on the feet by Belal Muhammad, I ain't picking you to survive on the feet against Ilia Topuria. Now, again, this would be a nightmare in the grappling department. It's probably the worst grappling fight you can give to Topuria, because I think Sean Brady is probably the best wrestler and the most dangerous wrestler at 170 right now. But I think if Topuria can defend the takedowns, which is a big if, but he comes from a jiu-jitsu background, I think when the fight's standing, it's a stylistically favourable fight for Topuria. Sean Brady walks forward, he eats shots to get in. You can't really afford to eat a shot from Ilia, so I can see Ilia finishing Sean Brady. Now, Shavkat Rakhmonov, again, I'm going to go with Shavkat to beat Ilia. I think Shavkat, again, big guy for 170, too good everywhere the fight goes. I think he grinds Ilia to a decision. He's this big guy, very rangy on the feet. He's Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think he'll be able to hang on the feet with Ilia. I just think he's too physical of a grappler. He's good at kind of holding people against the cage. The most dangerous grappler, I know I said that about Sean Brady, but apart from Sean Brady, the most dangerous grappler in this division goes to Shavkat. I think he'd grind him out to a decision. And then for Leon Edwards, now, I'm going to go with Leon to beat him, just because, again, it's more of a size thing. Leon's a big dude for 170. This big physical, I don't want to say specimen, but, he's a very physical guy for 170. He's got that rangy kickboxing style. So I think I could just see Leon kicking the fucking head off of Ilia Topuria. Not with a head kick KO, but just picking him apart with the kicks, body kicks, low kicks, keeping him at range. I can see Ilia trying to come in and knock him out just like he did to his boy Jai Herbert, but I think the size of Leon, and the fact that he's a, really technical kickboxer, he'd probably be able to survive and win a decision over Ilia Topuria. But so I think the result would be he'd beat Belal, he'd beat Sean Brady. I don't think he beats JDM. I think him and Leon's a bit of a give or take, but I'd lean towards Leon. And I think Shavkat beats him as well. But yeah, Ilia moving up, probably beats Belal, probably beats Brady. Not really anybody else at 170, unless we're classing Islam Makhachev, in which I think that'd be a pretty 50-50 fight at 170. JDM moving up to the middleweight division. Now, starting off with Chimaev versus JDM, I've got to go with Chimaev to win this one. I think Chimaev would maul JDM. Now, JDM's got good anti-grappling, but there's a difference between having good anti-grappling against Belal Muhammad and good anti-grappling against Khamzat Chimaev. He's the most physical grappler in the UFC, probably the most dominant grappler we've seen in the UFC since Khabib. Just dominated Dricus du Plessis 50-44 across 5 rounds. We've seen Khamzat against way better wrestlers than JDM, and he's been able to pretty much dominate them, at least with Usman in the first round. As good as JDM looked against Belal Muhammad, I don't think he'd do too well against against Khamzat. I think Khamzat continuously go with the takedowns, take down JDM round after round, and win a decision, or if not, get a submission. So I think Chimaev would maul JDM. JDM versus Dricus du Plessis. Now, this would be a fucking dogfight. This would be a violent-ass fight. I think Dricus would win a war, though. Again, Dricus is a big guy for 185. He's very well-rounded, good wrestling, good striking, good everywhere the fight goes. I feel like it'd be a little bit too much for JDM. And to be fair to JDM, we've seen him go to a split decision with Kevin Holland, and we've seen him struggle with Basil Hafez. I know that was coming off a weight cut, but I think Dricus du Plessis, the guy, he's probably one of the only guys at 170, or I guess 185 now, who could outdog JDM. And again, he's just too good everywhere the fight goes. I think Dricus wins. Imavov versus JDM, one of the best striking matchups you can make at 185, but I'm going to lead towards Imavov winning this one. I think he just outstrikes him. Imavov's one of the best and most underrated strikers in the UFC. Big, powerful guy on the feet with knockout power, very quick as well. The guy's rapid for 185. We just saw him outstrike Bralo across 5 rounds as well, so I'm going to lean towards Imavov winning that one. It would be competitive on the feet, but I think the speed of Imavov would just be too much for JDM. Strickland versus JDM. 2 boxers. You've got Strickland, obviously one of the best boxers at middleweight, and JDM, one of the best boxers. I'm going to go with JDM to win this one. I think Madlena decisions him, and I think it's a case of volume. As good as Strickland is, man, the guy is very hittable on the feet, and I know people kind of overrated his defense. We saw in the fight with Dricus on both occasions, especially the second one. He did fuck all in the second one. Dricus du Plessis, with his sloppy style, was outstriking Sean Strickland. I think the boxing, the technicality of JDM, I can see him getting a decision whenever Sean Strickland. I think it would be a war, one of the only fights where Strickland can walk away saying he's actually been in a war. But I think JDM picks apart Sean Strickland just because of the volume. And then Fluffy Hernandez. I think Fluffy Hernandez wrestles into a decision. I think Fluffy Hernandez, apart from Chimaev, is the best wrestler at 185. If anything, he's more kind of that physical wrestling. He's got that some of the best stamina in the UFC, wears people out. He's only getting better with his striking in each fight. I think he'd be a little bit too much for JDM, especially JDM moving up a division. I think Hernandez would out grapple and kind of maul JDM. So I think JDM, I don't really see him, the odds going too much in his favor at 185. I think he could probably get a win over Strickland because of the stylistic, differences between, or stylistic similarities between the two of them. But I think everybody else in the top 5 would probably get the win over JDM. And then for Khamzat Chimaev, moved up to light heavyweight, something that he's expressed. Chimaev versus Poatan. This is interesting because you've got the best and the most dominant grappler versus the most dominant striker in the UFC. Wrestling machine versus striking machine. I've got to go with Chimaev to beat Alex Pereira at 205, though. I think this is probably the worst matchup for Alex in the UFC. If you had to build one of the worst fights stylistically for Alex, Khamzat Chimaev would come something similar to that. I mean, you've got this guy who's out-wrestling grapplers who are way better than Alex. Guys like Usman in the first round, and just other wrestlers, the way that he mauled Robert Whittaker so carelessly, the way that he out-wrestled Dricus du Plessis so carelessly. And we obviously know the biggest flaw of Alex is the wrestling. And there's not really too many wrestlers at 205 to test him. Like, Ankalaev was the best wrestler, and Ankalaev's not even a wrestler like that. So I think Chimaev, he'd be overwhelming for Poatan. Poatan's not used to grapplers. You put him against the most dominant grappler in the UFC, who can make 205 as well. I think Chimaev would maul him. Probably gets the sub early on against Alex. So I'm going to go with Chimaev to beat Poatan. And then we've got Chimaev versus Yuri. Now, I can't see a world where Yuri takes him into deep waters and kind of outdogs him, because we've seen Chimaev in wars before against in the Gilbert Burns fight. If there's a guy that you don't want to be in a war with, it's Yuri. But again, I think the wrestling would be too much. I think Chimaev would maul Yuri. The best grappler we've seen Yuri against is Glover Teixeira, and that was a 42-year-old retiring Glover Teixeira, and even then Glover had a success on the ground at points. I think Chimaev would maul him. I think a second he shoots a double leg takedown against Yuri, we've not really seen anything to prove that Yuri gets back up. We've only seen Yuri against strikers in the UFC, so I think Chimaev would maul him. Ankalaev, I think Ankalaev's a bit of a stylistic nightmare. I think Ankalaev versus Chimaev, even though it's pretty 50-50, I'd probably go with Ankalaev to beat him. I think Ankalaev's one of the only guys, even though I can still see Chimaev out wrestling him. Ankalaev, big guy for 205. I can see him kind of surviving on the ground, getting back up to his feet and out striking Chimaev, because I do think the striking goes to Ankalaev in this situation. And again, a lot bigger than anybody that Chimaev's facing at 205, at 185. So I think Ankalaev's a bit of a stylistic nightmare. Probably pulls off a decision and out strikes Chimaev. Carlos Ulberg gets mauled. We've never really seen Ulberg get tested with the wrestling. Khalil Roundtree gets mauled. We've never seen Roundtree gets tested with the wrestling. So I think Chimaev had a lot of success at 205, and this is the problem with 205. There's not really any big grapplers in that division. Like I said, Ankalaev is the best wrestler at 205, and he's not even a wrestler, he's a striker. This is a division full of strikers. If you put the best wrestler in the division, best wrestler in the UFC and Chimaev in that division, I think he'd have a lot of success. So I think he beats everybody but Ankalaev. Even the Ankalaev fight is a bit of a coin flip, but I think because Ankalaev's just a little bit too well rounded, I think he'd survive. But everyone else, I think Chimaev would do a lot of success at 205. So if I'm Chimaev, I'm trying to dominate at 185, get a couple more defenses, then move up a weight class and get another belt, because I think he can do it. So Chimaev probably beats everyone but Ankalaev. And then for Alex, moving up to the heavyweight division, Alex versus Aspinall. I know there's going to be a lot of people that kind of lose confidence in Aspinall after his fight over Cyril Gane, even though it was only one round of it, and it was like a 30-27 significant strike ratio. I think I'm still going to back Aspinall to win this one. I just think there's too much things that Alex has to worry about coming from Tom Aspinall. I mean, first of all, Aspinall's fucking huge. He's a big heavyweight. It's probably one of the only fights where Alex has looked his opponent in the eye, and he's bigger than Alex. Aspinall's a dangerous dude on the feet. People say he's only got a 1-2, whatever. He's still dangerous on the feet, and he's actually pretty technical as well. He started implementing kicks as well into his game. Very light on his feet as well. Even though Tom gets clips a lot, again, the grappling is the big elephant in the room. Tom Aspinall could shoot a mean double leg takedown, and I think if he was able to set up a takedown over Alex, when the fight gets to the ground, it'll be a nightmare. You're facing this guy who's been doing jiu-jitsu his whole life, great jiu-jitsu artist. So even though the tricky thing for Aspinall would be to get the fight to the ground without getting caught, I think there's just too much Alex is going to worry about with Aspinall, and he's a weight class above him, and he's a big heavyweight too. I'm picking Aspinall to beat Poatan. And then for Cyril Gane, probably one of the best striking matchups you can make in the UFC. Two of the best strikers in their weight classes. But I think Poatan outstrikes Cyril Gane. Poatan's a former Glory kickboxing fighter who knocked out Alex Pereira and has had nothing but strikers at 85 and 205, and has beaten finished most of them. Cyril Gane's best striker he's faced and beaten is probably Taito Ivaza and Derek Lewis. So Poatan, even moving up a weight class, I think he'd outstrike Cyril Gane. He's a better kickboxer than Cyril Gane, and he's shown it against better opponents. Volkov, I think Volkov's another nightmare matchup for Porton. I think Volkov would be a nightmare matchup and beats Porton. And I say this because, first of all, Volkov's 6'9". This dude is huge. He would tower over Alex. Again, something that not many people can say against Alex in the UFC. 2, Volkov's one of the best kickboxers in this division as well. Great kickboxer, very good at range. Doesn't really get caught too much as well. I think Volkov would be able to kind of pick apart Alex or at least make it competitive. And the wrestling of Volkov too. I know he's more of a striker, but again, this big guy, big physical guy, huge for the heavyweight division, who can also wrestle. We've seen that in fights before as well. So I think Volkov's a nightmare matchup. I think it's a bit of a give or take between him and Porton, but I think because of how good Volkov is in the feet, and he's huge for a heavyweight as well, I can see Volkov beating Alex. Pavlovich, I mean, this would be one of the most powerful fights you can make in the UFC, but I think Porton starches him. I mean, Pavlovich kind of turned into a bit of a decision merchant since he got starched by Tom Aspinall. I think at some point in the fight, Porton would find the button, and I do think as good as Pavlovich is with the boxing, he is kind of, I don't want to say, he was always a bit overrated with the power. Like, he does do a lot of swinging, whereas Alex is more of like setting up the shot. So I think I'd probably lean towards Alex getting the shot over Sergey Pavlovich. And then for Curtis Blades, Alex starches him. Curtis Blades, every single one of his losses in the UFC, Derek Lewis, Pavlovich, Francis Ngannou, Tom Aspinall, all of them are against power punches. You feed him one of the hardest cities in the UFC right now in Porton. Porton would find the button of Curtis Blades at some point in the fight and knock him out. As good as the wrestling threat is from Blades, I don't see him having too much success against Alex. So I think the result would be Alex, he can do well, but I don't think he'd beat Aspinall, and I don't think he'd beat Volkov. But apart from that, I think Alex could do well against some of the top 5 at heavyweight. But those would be my hypothetical what if every UFC champion moved up a weight class, faced the top 5, how I think they do. Let me know your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching.